On today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to upgrade your front and rear brake rotors as well as your brake pads on your C7 or C7.5 Audi S6 or S7 with some two-piece brake rotors from JH Motorsports. So stick around and we'll show you how to do this. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. This is Audi C7 owners, and as always, I am Cameron, and I will be your guide today for this DIY. On today's video, we're going to be showing you guys how to change your brake rotors in the front and rear of your Audi S6 or S7. You can also use this guide if you have a 30T A6 or A7 to upgrade from those brakes to the S6, S7 brakes. Pretty simple, and I'll show you how to do that. We'll dive into a little bit later. But on the bench, I have here a beautiful set of two-piece JH Motorsports rotors. So you've got your front rotor here, and your rear rotor here. These are the driver's side. I've got my passengers off camera. We'll get into figuring out how you can tell the difference between those. But for those of you that don't know, I have been running S6 brakes for quite a while. The rotors are very, very, very well used. I need brake pads, so this is a good chance to show you guys how to do this. First thing we want to do before we start anything is unscrew the cap to our brake fluid reservoir. That way we relieve the pressure on the system when we push the pistons back and we don't damage our brake lines. Now that we've got our brake fluid reservoir open, it's time to do a little bit of prep work. First thing, you can see my screwdriver down there bracing into the rotor up against the brake caliper. And I've got the set screw already started. Make sure before you remove a set screw, you hit it with some PB Blaster, let it soak. Put your T30 socket in here, smack it a few times to loosen it up, and then bring it out. Mine got a little bit stripped up, so I'm gonna have to replace this thing. And I also had to use a little heat to get that thing out of there. Before we jump into the next step, one obvious thing to note is that I've got a stud conversion on here. If you've got the OEM lugs, you wanna go ahead and put one in here. You don't need to tighten all the way down, just get it a few threads in because you're gonna want that in there once it comes time to popping off the rotor. But the next step to prep, we're going to have to push back our calipers. But before we do that, we need to remove our wear sensor, which is right here. Your wear sensors are only on the driver's front and rear brake pads. You do not have any on the passenger side. It should just pull right out. So got that out, and mine is in good shape. Nothing's broken, so I could reuse this one if I want to. Now on the back here, there's one of your brake fluid bleed nipples, and the line for your wear sensor runs through that. So you'll need to pop that off, the little cap off the bleed nipple, to move this completely out of the way. Now that the wear sensor's out of the way, we need to push back the calipers. So what I like to do is get a pair of channel locks and get a rag, fold it over a couple times, and you're gonna use this to protect your caliper so you don't ruin any kind of paint you have on there. So get it on there and just gently squeeze, and it will open up the brake pads from your actual rotor. Now, when I do this side, it's probably gonna cover up the camera, so sorry about that. But you're gonna do this on each side, and make sure you do it on the top and the bottom so that you get them pushed all the way back. And once you do that, you're gonna see that this is starting to get loose here. These start to move around, and that's a good sign. We're behind the caliper now, and one thing we need to move out of the way, and once again, this is only on the driver's side, but to access the 21mm bolts that hold the caliper to the actual knuckle, we need to move the wear pad sensor wire completely out of the way. So it's got this clip here, and what you do is you just pull it out and then twist it, and then it will come right out of this bracket like that. And then we can move this out of the way to the other side. Okay, I hope this gets what I'm looking for. It might not show both, but there is a 21mm nut here, and then there's one on the bottom. And so I'm going to loosen those up with my breaker bar. And they shouldn't be, I mean, they should be tight, but not insanely tight to where you can't just give it one good press with a breaker bar. And then once that is loose, you can use your method of choice to remove those a little bit more quickly. For me, this is a perfect time to use my new handy dandy tool here from Tight Reach, which happens to be one of today's video sponsors. And while I work on this, that's a great time for us to cut scene and me tell you about Tight Reach. Today's sponsor is Tight Reach. These guys make some really cool products that help you get into some spaces that otherwise you wouldn't be able to get into, or at least not get into very easily. So, hence their name, they help you get into tight to reach spaces where you might not be able to get a typical socket wrench or anything like that. This is their 3/8 version, this is their 1/4 inch version, and they have other ones. They have a 1/2 inch, they have longer ones, all sorts of different ones. Metal construction, these have lifetime warranty. The cool thing about the 3/8 version is that it is impact rated, so we'll start down here, you can put it in here, and what's a 1-to-1 drive. Obviously for the 1/4 inch, you've got ratchet here. This is not impact rated, just as a heads up. They also have the shallow socket adapter set and socket wrench. So instead of it being a protrusion there, they've got it to where the adapter goes in and you've got a nice thin profile to get into some tight spaces. Now it also does have adapters if you want to use regular sockets. But I've been using these for a while and they came in handy when I was doing brake caliper bolts and other things, but I'm really happy with them. If you guys want to check out your own set, you can go into the link below in the comments and pick up your own. Like I said, lifetime warranty on these. I think they're really cool to have in the garage. They've come in really handy. So give Tight Reach a little click and yeah, we're gonna jump back into the video. All right, so once you've got your bolts backed out, and there's only two, there's two 21 mils, you're going to hold on to your carrier or your caliper because you don't want that falling and putting stress on your brake lines at all. Make sure you've got one of these fancy handy dandy hooks here. This should come off of your rotor relatively easily. Now, you can hook it through the actual carrier or the caliper itself, but I like to go through this upper bolt hole where one of the 21 mils goes, because that's gonna let me have access to work on the brake pads when I'm ready to do that. I'm gonna try and show as much of this as I can, but it's kind of tight working quarters here with the entire space here. So you've got your two brake pads inside here. Now you can see that retaining clip in the middle there, that kind of cross clip there. A lot of people say you need to remove that. I've never removed that when doing this job. Your brake pads are only held on basically by these two studs in the back, and we'll show you those in a little bit. So you can already see how loose this one is. And you can use something like this prying wrench type of a thing. Just be careful with your pistons, you won't damage anything. And you can go in here and kind of work those off, but you just need to basically get a little bit of leverage to force it under that retaining clip. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock these two out. Now, there are shims on the back of these, or at least you should have shims on the back of your brake pads that connect into your pistons. Do not lose those, do not damage those. I'm gonna do my best to show you how I get these out. Now, once again, they just are connected to those studs on the bottom. And if you just pry on the top, they're gonna get kind of binded up. So the best way to do it is to kind of put your hands here and then pry. So that way you're pushing in on the top while you're prying on the bottom with your screwdriver. And that should help a lot in terms of getting these things out of there. Like that. And now without the brake pad in there, you can see those studs that these things connect to, and those are dirty and grimy and gross, so we're going to hit them with Brake Clean. It's going to be helpful to have something to catch that underneath, but yeah, we're going to clean this up. This is a good time to inspect all your pistons, clean those up, make sure that the dust boots on those are not damaged, and it'll be time to remove the actual rotor of the vehicle. So if your rotor is stuck, then you're going to need to hammer it off. Mine is already kind of loose there, which is nice. But this is where if you have your one lug in there, this thing might be stuck to your hub. Get either, if you're replacing the rotor, which you probably should if you're replacing brake pads, get yourself a little mini sledge, smack it a couple times, and it should break loose and fall into your stud, and then you can take your, or fall into your lug, you can take that out and pull it off. If you're trying to reuse your rotor, you have to use a rubber mallet and try and break it loose. But in any case, mine is already loose, so we're going to pull it off. Once you have it off, you can inspect your hub. You can see a little bit of rust here. That's one thing with studs. It's kind of difficult to clean that, but if you have a wire wheel or something, you can get in here and clean that up. And you can clean up your dust shield if you feel so inclined to. All right, so I've got some new gloves on so I don't smudge up this brand new, shiny, beautiful JHM two-piece rotor. You want to get it lined up with your set screw. This is where having a stud conversion comes in really handy. Push that all the way back. Believe it or not, I think I salvaged that set screw, so I'm going to go ahead and get that in there as well. Okay, got the set screw in, we've got the rotor secured in place. The next step is going to be just putting on the brake caliper. But before we do that, let's talk about direction. These rotors are directional, and the way you can tell is the direction of the slots in your rotor. So for your driver's side, the slots are going to be pointing from the aluminum hat backwards in this direction. For the passenger side, they would be going this way. So hope that makes sense. One of the guys at JHM showed me a visual in text form, and I should put it up on the screen here about now, and that helped me remember which side is which, because they're not marked on the hat here, which maybe that's something JHM might think about doing in the future. Who knows? But I'm sure it's cost effective just to leave these the same without any noticeable differences between them from side to side. But so anyways, I'm going to get the camera set up, and we're going to get the caliper back onto the rotor. So we cleaned up the brake caliper pretty good. We checked the pistons and they all look good. Before we move on to the next step, I'm going to go ahead and prep a little bit more. We're going to be taking some brake grease here, and we're going to be coating those studs, all 4 of them. So the front and the rear studs, we're going to coat those because that is what your brake pads will glide over. I mean, I guess you could technically kind of call these your glide pads. I don't know. But anyways, we're going to get those coated. And then another spot that we're going to put some brake grease on is the actual caliper retaining clip there. Like just that middle part, the edge and the whole part that goes kind of back towards the pistons, because your brake caliper, I'm sorry, your brake pads will actually slide on that as well. So we're gonna get those greased to make our life a little bit easier. So I'm gonna get this done, and then we'll get the brake pads installed there. Don't forget to install your brake pad shims back in here before you put your brake pads back on, and do not lose these or damage them. They are incredibly expensive. I think from the dealership, an entire set of 12 costs somewhere around like $300, and it's absurd. But yeah, they are 3 on each side, so get those put in. I have been told that if you do lose these, you can still use it just with the regular pistons without those, but so it's not the end of the world if you lose them, but I definitely think you should keep them if you got them. One last little bit of prep before we put the brake pads back in is I'm going to put just a little bit of brake grease right here on this top piece. This is what glides against the retaining pin there, and just going to smooth that out. You can dab a little bit in there if you want. Those are the holes that go over those studs inside the brake caliper that this actually connects to. But yeah, I'm using PowerStop Z26 brake pads. These things are killer for the money, actually incredibly hard to beat. I've been running them for a while and really impressed with them. And yeah, no, not a video sponsor, I just like them. So now it's time to put the brake pads in. Obviously the shiny side goes to the back. Now the trick here is to kind of go it at an angle to get on and then press backwards. So my hand might block this a little bit. I'm going to go at an angle. I'm going to get this kind of set up against that retaining pin. I'm going to push down as it slides onto the pins and then back. And that's super, super, super simple. So we'll get the other one, do that side. I got grease all over my fingers. Okay, so once again, in at an angle, get it onto the retaining pin, push down, and get it onto the studs. It's kind of hard to do without the camera, or the camera in the way, so you already saw me do one side. I'm going to move this thing so I can finish this. So unfortunately, there's no great way to film this, but what I can say is have your 21mm bolts ready to go, and what you're basically going to do is make sure those pads are pushed all the way back. You're going to take it off of your J-hook, and you're going to use your hand to slide it over the rotors, and then your other hand to start to feed the bolt in. So I'm going to try and do that while I have the camera going here. So got that on here. We're just going to kind of get it generally in place there. And then gonna reach in the back, find the hole, and start working it through. And I can already tell that's not it. So I'm gonna have to move the camera out of the way and stick my head back there so I can see what I'm doing and get these started. All right, I got the bolts back on and torqued them down, and I should have the torque values on screen for you guys here. But before we go any further, we need to make sure that we have our wear pad sensor put back into place. So I'm gonna route it back over and through and make sure that it is all back in place here. Okay, got it back over here. We're just gonna slide that right back into where it came from. And you want to be gentle with these because if you push too hard, they can snap. So we've got that in, we've got it routed back through the cap of the nipple back here. And now we are completely done with installing the front rotor. Okay, so front rotors are done and the rear rotors are done. I went ahead and knocked those out, and I didn't film it because I already have a dedicated DIY video for doing the rear rotors on a C7. So for those of you that have an S6, S7 going, wait a minute, that's not gonna be applicable. The A6 with a 3OT has the exact same rear brake setup that the S6, S7s do, with a couple small differences. One, you guys get fancy powder coat. Two, your brake carrier bolts are both 13mm bolts that hold it to the carrier, whereas the A6 has two weird different shaped bolts, so that won't be applicable to you. And three, your rock shield and your rotors are a little bit bigger than the A6. Otherwise, everything else is the exact same. You will need OBD11 or VCDS to retract the electronic parking brake. So if you have any questions about that, leave them in the comment below. But if you check the pinned comment in the description, I'll have a link to that rear brake rotor and pad DIY from when I did it on my A6 beforehand. Now, we've already reattached the brake fluid reservoir cap, so we got that nice and tight. The next thing to do is to get in there and pump the brakes, make sure everything feels good and starts to feel normal, and then we need to go out and we need to bed in the brakes. It's really important that you do that correctly. Whatever brake pads that you use should have a bed-in procedure. Otherwise, we're gonna jump into a discussion about how I'm gonna bed in my brakes. We're gonna talk about some brake pads you can and can't use on these rotors, and we're gonna go over some of the advantages of these two-piece rotors from JH Motorsports compared to the one-piece OEM rotors. Let's talk about how you can use this video and my other DIY brake videos from the OEM A6 brakes in order to convert your OEM A6 brakes to OEM S6 brakes. So real quick, what's the difference? First off, rotor size. S6 front rotors are 400mm, where your front rotors on the OEM 3OT A6s are 356. And then on the rear, the S6 rotors are 356mm, where I think the OEM A6 ones are 340, maybe a little smaller. Don't quote me on that one, but they're smaller. The rear calipers between the A6 and the S6 are the exact same. No difference other than finish. The S6 ones will have a powder coat of either black or red, depending on what year you get, whereas the A6 rear caliper will be just raw metal and not pretty looking. Same thing on the actual carriers for the rear calipers. There's also one small difference there. The S6 rear carrier is a little bit different in size than the A6 one. They look almost identical if you hold them up next to each other, but after speaking with Jake from JH Motorsports, shout out, he let me know that there is a difference, and they've seen problems arise for people that don't swap out the actual carrier and they only swap out the rotors. So keep that in mind, you're gonna need that. Up front, obviously, the only thing you're gonna need is the S6 brake caliper. You will not need your carrier for the front brake caliper on this. You're going to remove that, and it's just some bolts in the back. You can see all that in my DIY video. That'll all be linked below. But once you get all the OEM caliper, carrier, rotor, and everything off of the hubs, the last thing you're going to need are the brake dust shields. You're going to need the S6 brake dust shields. They're held on by, I think, 5 T30s in the front and rear, maybe a few less in the rear, but either way, brake dust shields. The A6 ones are too small. They have the potential to rub up against the back of your S6 rotors once you get them on there. So get the larger brake dust shields. Once you have all that stuff, you just bolt it on. As you can see in this video, the caliper for the front just bolts directly to the hub assembly. Super simple. And in the rear, everything's the exact same, except there is a bolt difference. If you look at my video for the OEM A6 ones, there's like a weird bolt that has like this spacer kind of thing. On the rear carrier and caliper for the S6 ones, it's just straight bolts through. So yeah, keep that in mind and make sure you have the right hardware for that. The other thing you have to deal with is bleeding your brakes once you get everything installed, because you will have to disassemble or remove the brake line from your OEM caliper to put on the new ones. And it's just an 11mm nut that holds them on there, I believe. 11, 12, I'm pretty sure it's 11. But anyways, you remove it, you're gonna drip a little bit of brake fluid, connect it to the next one, and then you're gonna have to bleed your brakes. I'll have a link to the Irwin manual in the comments and the description below so you can see or look up the steps to do that. I don't have a video on that yet. I plan on having one in the future, but in any case, it's a huge upgrade. I love having the S6 brakes on my car, especially in mountain roads. It made a massive difference. So highly suggest you do it. It's a pretty budget-friendly upgrade for your brakes that yield a really big outcome. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below or DM me. We're gonna jump back into this video. Okay, so let's talk about not only the bed-in procedure, but some benefits of running the two-piece rotors. So real quick, the bed-in procedure, I got my fancy little note card here so I don't miss anything for you guys, but your brake pads should have some kind of bed-in procedure on there, but JHM gives their own recommendation. And the first thing is, one, do not use any EBC brake pads on these rotors. their composite material on those rotors, or I'm sorry, on those brake pads has a tendency to melt quickly and build up on the rotor, and they've seen a lot of people encounter pulsing because of the EBC brake pads. So not everyone has experienced that, but they had it frequently enough that they've put that warning out, and it's on their website when you go to order these. They recommend doing multiple hard stops from 60 miles an hour down to 5 miles an hour until you get brake fade. Once you feel the brake fade, then just drive around and let the brakes cool down completely back to normal operating temperature. So that means just drive around, open highway, 15, 20 minutes or so. If you have to come to a stop when the brakes are really hot after doing the hard stops, put your car into park. Don't hold your foot on the brake because it can melt material onto the pad and cause pulsing. So we don't want to do that. That's how I'm going to do it. We installed another set of 2-piece rotors on an S7. We did it that way. Worked beautifully. So that's the bed-in procedure. Let's talk about some specific details about the rotors themselves and some benefits. They are aluminum hats made in-house at JH Motorsports with their CNC machines, and they're hard anodized, think type 3 anodizing, whatever that means, but very durable anodization on the hats. The rotors are zinc plated, also made in America. So, you know, you're not going to pay tariffs on them, so that's good. For the front rotors, you're going to shave 22 pounds of unsprung weight compared to OEM. And so the OEM's weight for each rotor is 30.25 pounds. Each JHM rotor is 19.5 pounds. So that's 22 pounds in the front. And then in the rear, the stock weight is 18.5 pounds each rotor, and JHM is 15. So that's about 7 pounds of unsprung weight. So if you do both front and rear, that's a total of 29 pounds of unsprung weight. That's going to help your acceleration, your stopping distances, your cornering, just everything. That's a huge amount of performance gained just by installing these. Going to some of the designs, the rotor cooling air gap on the front, the stock size is 13.06 millimeter. JHM is 18.2 millimeters. So you have a much bigger gap for air to move through the rotors. That's going to cool them better, dissipate heat better. It's going to make them more efficient as well. And the fin design as well, on the stock ones, they're straight fins, whereas on the JH Motorsports rotors, they are directional. And with the directional, you have just a much more efficient airflow as well to help aid in dissipating the heat and keeping the brakes cool. Some other things, because of the 2-piece design, you don't have heat transfer that would go like in a stock rotor all the way through the center into the center hat part of an OEM rotor. So you have much lower chance of having rotational expansion because of that. You also have a much lower chance of experiencing cracking with your rotors as well as any kind of warping. After the initial investment, these are more expensive upfront than OEM rotors, but after the initial investment, it's a lot cheaper to maintain because these rings are going to be a lot cheaper than buying an entire new brake rotor over and over. Another cool thing about this, because of the fact that you can change these, if you want to run a custom braking setup, you can actually reach out to JHM and get different size rings for your custom brake setup. I know a lot of people have seen TGK Motorsports Q, I think it's a C8 RS6 brake caliper. I think that's what he got it from. They're massive brakes, but you could get those and run a larger ring to accommodate those if you want to. On the top of that, the slots here on the rotors, those are actually your wear indicators to let you know when you need to replace the rings. So once these slots actually disappear from use, it's time to swap them out. And you have 14 bolts holding it together. You just remove the rotor, undo those bolts, separate it, the hat on each side, install the new ring, and then tighten them back up. All right, let's wrap up this video with some closing thoughts. First off, hope this video is very educational and helpful for all you guys out there tackling this stuff in your garages. Secondly, I want to just tell you I've been running these for about 4 months now, and I love them. I have not had any issues whatsoever. I took the car to Alpine Volksfair and ran the mountains with the boys. Pretty aggressive driving out there without any issues. And comparatively, we also installed the 034 replica. I think they're the same things, they look exactly the same, but the 034 2-piece rotors that Tyler Hayes from Void Carbon got from AliExpress, and you guys will see that in the S7 series. We went out and we ran the same roads, and his did not hold up as well as mine did. You guys might have seen my Instagram reel about that. In fact, he's getting rid of those, and he's doing another upgrade, which maybe we'll have a video for you guys on that. But mine have held up great. I've also just done Tail of the Dragon with my car with these brakes on there and brake rotors, and took my son out there because that's all he wanted to do for his birthday after he went to Helen with me and the guys. He said, "Dad, I don't want to party, I just want to go do mountain roads." So my wife and I took him to Tail of the Dragon and did some aggressive driving for him out there. Wife hated it. My son loved it. It was amazing. I loved seeing it in his eyes when we were hitting the tail of the Dragon, just aggressive acceleration, aggressive braking over and over, and he was just giggling the whole time. But throughout all that driving, no brake fade. I felt completely in control, and just I felt so much confidence in these brakes. On top of that, the shocking thing to me was the immediate difference in driving and handling characteristics as well as performance from that unsprung weight being chopped off by a swap into these two-piece rotors versus the OEM rotors. It was very noticeable, which I truthfully did not expect. So anyways, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Please like and subscribe to the channel. That helps me out a lot. We have hit 30,000 subscribers, which is absolutely insane. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next DIY video.